And hello and welcome. I'm John Bachman. Around the nation today, there are calls for peace after last night's savage attack on police officers in Dallas. We are bringing you special live coverage today here on Newsmax TV. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours, and then we'll get into our regularly scheduled programs with Steve Malzberg at 7 o'clock, then J.D. Hayworth at 8 o'clock. Of course, 5 police officers are dead. 7 were wounded in that ambush, which has resulted in the worst single-day loss of life among law enforcement members in this country since the September 11th terror attacks. As I mentioned, we're going to have J.D. Hayworth and Steve Malzberg here with us in just a few moments. But first, let's check in with Miranda Kahn, who's been staying on top of the developing aspects of this story all day. She's now joining us live from our newsroom. Miranda, what's the latest?
Thanks, John. Well, while all eyes are focused on this horrible tragedy that happened in Dallas, we do want to update you on a deadly shooting that happened in Tennessee. Tennessee authorities now tell several sources that a man who opened fire yesterday on the highway also targeted police officers because he was disturbed over recent incidents involving blacks and police officers. That shooter killed 1 person and wounded 3 others. But the video that you're seeing right now, that's actually in Dallas. Just a short time ago, police began to search Micah Johnson's home. Johnson was one of the gunmen who killed those 5 police officers last night in Dallas and wounded 7 others. Here's a witness describing that horrific carnage.
Yeah. Man, like all of the cops were getting shot, man. I just saw cops bending over, man. Like it had to have been like 5 or 6 cops, like they was all getting shot down, man.
And police say 3 suspects are in custody. The 4th, once again, Micah Johnson, was killed during that standoff.
We saw no other option but to use our bomb robot.
Yeah, the Dallas police chief says he is just heartbroken over what happened. He said the suspects say that he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. President Obama also offered his condolences today.
Today is a wrenching reminder of the sacrifices that they make for us. Today, our focus is on the victims and their families.
The president says the focus today is on the victims and their families. That is the very latest from the newsroom, and we'll, of course, continue to bring you live updates throughout the night. John, back to you.
All right, Miranda, we'll see you here very shortly. We're also standing by for a news conference. Texas Governor Greg Abbott expected to address the media very shortly. In the meantime, let's welcome in J.D. Hayworth, host of Newsmax Prime. Also, do we have Steve with us? Is Steve able to join us? Okay, we got Steve with us too. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. Pretty surreal, J.D., to watch all this play out. It was hard to believe at some points that this is the United States of America.
Well, we take a look at what happened last night, and it is something that Americans are trying to process today. The horrific nature of the attack, the circumstances, the video that we have from social media and from various television outlets in Dallas, and then the word today that one Micah Xavier Johnson, a 25-year-old African-American, an Army reservist who had served a tour of duty in Afghanistan, was the principal gunman. We are hearing now that Dallas police are saying they believe he was the, quote, lone gunman, but there were suspicions last night that he did not act alone. And of course, we see around the country the copycats. Very graphic video from last night. This just horrified Americans as they saw this particular scene on their television screens last night and via video as we see this right now. And we warn you, there's some graphic moments to this video.
Certainly, and as you watch the suspect there in the video move, and Steve, I know you've seen this video as well. Very difficult to watch, and we all knew from the get-go, based on looking at that, anybody who's spoken to a military expert knows that that was not someone who was unfamiliar with this type of stuff, and it was well planned and coordinated.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, as to the one shooter theory, it's strange because the 3 people they have in custody, the mayor and the police commissioner of Dallas, have repeatedly told us at multiple press conferences that they're not cooperating, that they're not forthcoming, they're not saying anything, they're not giving their names. If they're not involved, what's that all about? So I want to point out, you played a clip of the president, and I'm sure he's heartbroken, but he wasn't heartbroken at 1 o'clock in the morning Poland time, just a few hours before the shootings in Dallas took place, where he stood up on foreign soil, which he's so good at, and he trashed the United States of America, how awful the blacks and Hispanics are treated by police. He gave bogus statistics that had no meaning whatsoever because there's no context to them. And he said, we're not over our racist past. So, you know, between that and Hillary basically finding the two officers in Louisiana and Minnesota guilty and other rhetoric from the left, and how did this shooter know the parade route? We need to know who had the parade route in advance.
Well, you know,
Was
there's
it
so
just
much there's so
Black
much
Lives
stuff
Matter?
circulated on social media today. You know, and anybody can take a listen. If there's a protest plan, where they're going to be, and you know, if you have military experience, JD, you know, they know the points of egress and ingress. They know where to be.
Well, what we are seeing is an acceleration with the advent of social media, and we're also seeing something else that Steve touched on, and I share his concerns. As Steve mentioned, 1 a.m. polling time, about 7 o'clock here, maybe in the 6 o'clock hour Eastern last night. There was our president, away from home, criticizing certain Americans, and again setting up the context of racial animus. The irony is that this president was supposed to be our first post-racial president, and in so many ways he has become our most racial president. Yes, he is adroit enough in terms of rhetoric to offer comments that in essence are verbal tranquilizers or rhetorical anesthesia, but then comes the needle. The blame of race or the panacea of gun control. And it is most unfortunate. I remember a passage not related to this, but I remember in the horrific mass murder at the Charleston church a year ago, there's the president speaking words of comfort, and then it's time to introduce the agitation, where he starts, people are asking tonight why both little Johnny and little Jamal are being interviewed. But little Johnny gets a call back and little Jamal does not. Those bon mots, those observations are poisonous. They're political poison from a commander-in-chief who sadly is an agitator-in-chief. What a wasted opportunity over 7.5 years that escalates exponentially in the wake of this.
Now, as you know, the president said this as well, you know, and it's, you take it for what it's worth in light of those comments that he discussed right before this attack took place. But there are lots of calls for unity. Steve, Paul Ryan, chiefly among them today, among congressional Republicans calling for unity. I don't think you're too optimistic, though, there will be anybody listening to that, any unity after this, because we do seem to already be going off into our different corners already in this country.
Well, I don't know what unity we should have. We have two police shootings. You know, Elizabeth McDonald, who has a great new book on cops under attack, said today that black males make up 6% of the population, and they're responsible for 60% of police shootings. So I don't know what unity people think. What does that even mean? Cops have to do their job. They protect all communities, including the black communities, which have higher crimes in a lot of inner cities, and they're going to continue to do their job. But if they're indicted, convicted, and sentenced by our highest elected officials just on the basis of a little snippet of videotape, and in the case of Minnesota, when we don't even know what led up to the shooting, we have no idea.
It was striking, guys, to hear the governor of Minnesota, you know, say this wouldn't happen if it were white people. There's no way to know that, and we should all take a time out, take a breath at least before we start saying things like that. There's no way to know.
This is why, as much as I wish tonight on my program there could be a moratorium on politics, it's less than candid. You mentioned the ill-tempered remarks of Mark Dayton. We also see this behavior on the left. Attorney General Lynch earlier this afternoon again offering condolences, but then encouragement to protesters. I think everyone in America better slow down and understand that protests can quickly turn into riots. That may not have been the case last night, but we saw the deadly results in the aftermath of the peaceful protest in Dallas.
And this is certainly more than what we've seen.
And we have two more shootings today, by the way.
Right.
One in Missouri and one in Georgia.
Yeah, and Miranda talked about the other case in Tennessee as well. And this is, you know, this is not really new. We've done stories about this all the time. Multiple cops killed in 1 week. The statistics show that, you know, it might be on par with the same as last year, but you talk to police who actually work on the streets, they feel it. They live with this every single day. We're not police officers. We don't know what they go through. We'll have Tom Watley here, a retired police detective, very shortly. He's going to talk to us about what he's hearing from his fellow law enforcement brothers and sisters. But you know, we can agree, guys, right, that these things don't have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, you can support the police and still, you know, try to root out the very few bad cops there are. They're bad apples, right?
Let's stress that. It is not systemic. There is not systemic racism in United States police departments. There are bad apples. People of all races and nationalities can succumb to tension. We ask the cops to do a very difficult job.
Hardest job in the country.
But we also see those who exploit problems for political gain, and that is what is dangerous and toxic.
Go ahead, Steve.
John, when you say bad apples, and I'm not saying you're implying this, we have to make sure that we don't include the cops in Minnesota.
You're right, and we're not talking about them.
And the Michael Brown case, the Tamir Rice case,
Exactly.
the Eric Gardner case, and even though it wasn't a cop, Trayvon Martin, juries, grand juries, DAs, DOJ, they all found, or to one extent or another, the cops acted correctly.
Right.
So when we hold these up and we have riots in the streets, and then the cops, guess what? They did their job.
There are cases like the one in South Carolina with the gentleman Walter Scott. You can't conflate those with what happened these cases aren't all the same, and we can't, paint them all with one broad brushstroke. And we, as a country, we've got to do a better job. JD.
Well, again, you pointed this out. We have to understand what goes on. And yet, in a media cycle with social media, where now it changes by the nanosecond, that becomes a corrosive catalyst that lends itself to copycats and lends itself to demagoguery. It's a very, very dangerous equation for our future.
We're going to continue to try and sort all this out. JD, Steve, stick around. We got much more to come here. Special live coverage of Newsmax TV and the Dallas shootings. Stay tuned.
Market and Lamar. Assist officer, shots fired. Okay, code 3, stay off the radio, officer down. Shots fired, officer down, it's an assist officer. Hold on, family, show me route. Code 3, Market and Lamar. Code 3, Market and Lamar, shots fired. Saying the suspect has a rifle. Got a rifle, put us on this call.